On today's episode, we share updates on the Playing with Fire documentary coming soon to a theater near you. How to build an escape route for a corporate hierarchy that doesn't make room for you. And Peter asks a question about essentially what comes down to Hail Mary Fi. I'm 60 years old and broke. Is financial independence still possible? Welcome to the Ultimate Crowdsource Personal Finance Show. This is your Friday Roundup.
You're listening to Choose FI Radio. The blueprint for financial independence lives here. If you're looking to unlock the secrets to financial independence and early retirement, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and join a community of like-minded people who are getting off the hamster wheel and taking control of their lives in the pursuit of financial independence. Choose FI, your home for financial independence online.
All right, super excited to dive into this past week's episode and talk about our takeaways with Rich and Regular, and what an incredible episode and what incredible content they actually brought to the table. And to help me with this, I have my co-host Brad here with me today. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, Jonathan, I'm doing quite well. Yeah, what's going on over in your world?
Well, the biggest thing is, we record these roundups on Tuesdays. Today is actually my son's birthday, and awesome. Happy birthday, Zachary, when you're listening to this at some point down the road.
He's 2, right?
I know he's 2. What's crazy about it is when we started the show back at the beginning of 2017, we didn't initially have a Friday roundup. That was something that we realized that we wanted this extra touch point to go back and talk about feedback from the community and our own personal takeaways, just to kind of be able to digest the Monday episode and really figure out how we could implement it into our own lives. But what's interesting about that is when we started doing the Friday Roundup in March or April of that year, we were actually expecting my son. And so when he was born, I was in the process of commuting back and forth from the hospital. And I actually left the hospital to come here and record one of our very early Friday Roundups back in the day. And then I would go back to the hospital and be with my wife and son. And so it's amazing now, my son, for him to be turning 2 years old, just the progression of time and also the progression of the show over the past 2 years. It's just amazing to go back and think about it.
Yeah, that does not seem that long ago, but yeah, 2 years to the day. That is crazy. It's funny to think when I met you, Danny was only a couple months pregnant with Zachy, and wow, yeah, he's 2 years old. He's a big guy now. It's pretty cool. So, and yeah, when you came home from the hospital and recorded a Friday Roundup, I'm like,
this
man, we
committed.
don't have to do this thing. Yeah, that's exactly. I'm like, wow, he's got some kind of work ethic. Very impressive.
Thank you. Yeah, that's exciting. Well, Brad, talking about, announcements other than my son's birthday, one of the other biggest announcements in the FI community was the release or the early release of the Playing with Fire documentary. The people that backed it in the Kickstarter campaign got early access to see it. I know me and you loved it when we took a look at it, but the feedback is flowing in and it is amazing.
Yeah, it really is. It's funny. I'm getting inundated with comments from my friends and family. My brother said, I think him and his wife have watched it 3 times. You get a 72-hour viewing window if you're one of the early Kickstarter backers. And yeah, he's watched it at least 3 times in that 72-hour window. And yeah, it's just a really phenomenal movie. I mean, Scott and Travis and the whole team just did a wonderful job. And I know this was a labor of love, but I mean, this was a project. I mean, this thing took forever and it was difficult, but man, they came out with something that everyone in the FI community can just be proud of. It's a real testament to all their hard work.
So we are going to be getting on a phone call with Scott this afternoon, but I thought we can go ahead and tee up this announcement for the community. For those of you that are hearing this, that are like, I got to see this documentary. How do I access this documentary? It's going to be okay. We've got your back. Here's the plan, as I understand it. Starting in June, this documentary is going to become available. We're going to be flying to San Diego, and we're actually going to be doing a premiere in San Diego where, honestly, Brad, help me with these numbers, but I expect that it'll be at least 500 people at the premiere for this documentary.
That's exactly what I'm expecting as well. Who knows? It could be 500 to 1,000 people, maybe between San Diego and LA and everyone there in Southern California and people flying in. I suspect this is going to be a real big deal and it's just going to be fun. I know you and I are flying across the country to be there and to see it at this grand premiere. And Scott and Taylor and the whole team will be there. So should be a really, really fun time. Jonathan, I guess at least how we understand it, we'll certainly keep everybody updated, is it's not just going to be a couple of these grand screenings, though there'll probably be about 5 of them that are just like these massive mega events. But essentially every city in America and the world can have their one big screening. So it's going to work through a website. I think it's called Tug. And pretty much there'll be someone who's like an admin of that local area. They are going to help facilitate selling tickets. And our local groups are going to really be a big part of this. So don't expect this to just be in San Diego and New York and DC and places like that. This is going to be everywhere. So this is really our opportunity. I mean, I think when I watch this movie, I see it as Taylor's story. And Jonathan, she's a star. To me, it was, how can 2 regular people who are spendy people, right? Like they're not lying about this. They spent a lot of money. They made money. They spent it. They changed their entire lives. And you see that this isn't just, okay, we're going to change and our lives are going to be easier tomorrow. This is a journey that you have to go through, and it's a mental journey. They got there on the other side. And I think the movie does a wonderful job of telling that.
Yes, absolutely. And I think the way to describe this is this documentary, for the vast majority of the world, will be the gateway to the financial independence community. This is going to be the easiest way that you will ever have or have ever had to introduce this concept, this idea to your family and friends, which is why making these screenings available in every city is a critical piece of this, and why we feel so fortunate to have these local groups in every major city around the country. If you are not already in one of the local groups, you can very easily find one. Just go to choosify.com/local. If you're already in a local group, we're going to be reaching out to those local groups individually to find out where would be a great spot, a great place to actually hold a screening. So like right here in Richmond, I can think of a few of those already that immediately come to mind as a wonderful place to have a screening. We're certainly going to be sourcing those suggestions from you, a place where not only can you watch the movie, but afterwards have an awesome meetup, have a place that you can actually act as an introduction to this concept, this path that you've already chosen for yourself and your family. This whole idea of bringing a friend to a screening is amazing. And I think the threshold, and please don't hold me to this, but the threshold to actually have a screening in your community is about 70 tickets. So once we actually go out and we find all the venues that it's going to be at, and we line it up with this ticket site called Tug, if we can sell 70 tickets in a city in your area, then you get a screening. That's it. You're going to get a screening. And then from there, bring a friend, right? Like bring one additional person that you think, you know how Brad has talked about those cues that you think that someone might be interested in this because they've mentioned whatever, that they set up their 401k, that they made a frugal choice, whatever that may be. Invite that person to come watch this screening of this movie with you. And honestly, I mean, if there's ever been one moment, one opportunity for us to spread this idea of financial independence, this documentary is going to be the perfect starting place for that conversation. And I think it's a wonderful opportunity for us as a diverse community all across the country and all across the world to really come together and show support for this idea and this concept. So hold off on the personal viewing parties in your living room. Think bigger. Let's go bigger with this. And really looking forward. More announcements coming your way. Screenings all across the country coming in the month of June. Hang in there. It's going to be worth the wait. I promise. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and switch gears here and talk about this past week's episode with Julian and Kirsten. And Brad, the feedback has started to come through for this episode, and it was incredibly gratifying to see it.
Yeah, it's been amazing. Just this morning, we got one on Facebook from Glaisa, and she said, "This has got to be in my top 5 favorite episodes of Choosify. After listening to the episode, I read The Letter to Middle-Class Black America, and never before have I had text resonate so deeply in what it feels like not only to be a middle-class Black family, but to be a middle-class Black family pursuing FI, which becomes an even smaller subset. Kudos to Jonathan and Brad for expanding the FI conversation and for the genuine curiosity they shared in diving deeper into the context of the racial divide as it pertains to wealth building and education."
And, you know, I think it's so important to really give credit back to Julian and Kirsten for bringing this dialogue to our community. And this was not a conversation that they took lightly. They really wanted to make sure that they were providing as much value and insight for our community as possible. And we all went into this episode knowing that this was important. What is the information divide or the racial gap in this case that we were talking about? What is the bridge that we need to cross to really make this applicable for everybody? And what I loved about the content that they've been writing is they've actually been doing that. Like what I heard from them, this is an optimistic story. Now it's grounded, heavily grounded in reality that you can't just gloss right over. But the obstacles that they said were there, they have overcome. When it comes to career hacking, Kirsten is crushing it. When it comes to entrepreneurship, together, they are crushing it. When it comes to real estate, they are crushing it. But when you look back, they were kind of saying, this is some of the headwind that we are fighting against. And in order to do this, you have to be able to get the information out there, and you have to be able to do it from a relatable place. People are looking for individuals that have walked a mile in their shoe and are 1 or 2 steps ahead, but they can identify with their path. For me, that was the most critical part of this, and why I'm so grateful for Julian and Kirsten being a part of this community.
Yeah, and something that Kirsten said, we're not relationship experts. We're not financial experts. We're regular people who had the courage to tell our story. And Jonathan, that just hit me like a bolt of lightning. I mean, we have talked about for hundreds of episodes now, it is about that storytelling. It's about seeing someone else who you can see yourself in that person who's successful and who went through this journey. And you can take comfort from that. And you can try to emulate them and say, wow, if they did it, I can too. And that's all across the spectrum of stories. We've seen that from just dozens upon dozens of guests that we invariably get emails and comments just saying, wow, I saw myself in their story. I just love how she said, we're not relationship experts. We're not even financial experts. We've done this and we had the courage to tell our story. And that meant a lot to me. And you asked him, like, why didn't he start a business? And his answer was, he didn't have anyone to look up to when he was younger. Nobody in his community was an entrepreneur. Nobody was buying real estate, right? You talk about the 3 asset classes. Nobody was buying stocks, right? Like, it was all these things that, because maybe, Jonathan, that generational wealth transfer, because there was no generational wealth, there wasn't anybody to look up to. So they had to go this path alone and figure it out themselves. But now they can be that beacon up on the hill that people are trying to say, wow, look at what Julian and Kirsten did. We can do that too. And that, to me, is what this is all about.
Yeah. And when you actually talk about generational wealth, I think that was an important point. This wasn't about getting large inheritances. I mean, when you look at millionaires, most millionaires do not become millionaires that first generation because they receive $500,000 from their parents. That's not how it works. But what you're talking about is having those role models, having people that have gone 1 or 2 steps before you and have done it. It's the generational information transfer, right? Of how this process actually works. And so in that regards, Jillian and Kirsten, both because they've done it, and then now because they have the courage to tell their stories, are treading the path, are creating the path for those that will come behind them. That is incredibly powerful.
Yeah, and Jonathan, sometimes it's even the little things, right? So like, I look at my own life and my own story, and I don't think, I mean, my parents weren't wealthy. I didn't grow up with a silver spoon. I mean, none of these things, but I had a backstop because they made a decent living and they saved some money. So I knew if something terrible happened to me and I couldn't like pay my rent that month or something, you know, I had credit card debt, they could probably have bailed me out for $500, $1,000, $2,000. Like I never asked them for money, obviously, but in the back of my mind, I always knew that if I failed just terribly, they would be there. Just that psychological benefit. Like, you can't discount how important that is. And also just thinking about these entrenched systems. My Aunt Karen, so she worked at a stockbroker company, for lack of a better word. And while she wasn't like a high-powered stockbroker, she was an admin, but she was able to get me a summer internship there. And that, Jonathan, was the time where I saw my first compound interest calculator. That changed my entire life. Seeing that, I actually gave this at a presentation at the FI Summit recently on like inflection points in my life. I didn't have 20 legs up. Like, my aunt wasn't a VP at Goldman Sachs. She was an admin at Solomon Smith Barney. But even just that 1 or 2 steps up was enough to get me in the door, get me this job, and get me this life-changing information. So, like, when you look back at your story, I don't think I came from this amazing, amazing wealth of privilege, but still, when I look at my story, I know that backstop was always there.
Some more feedback that came through on YouTube. I totally understand what Kirsten and Julian said. I'm an African-American, 53 years old, and I've dealt with the inequities related to financial access. What worked for me is investing in a stock index fund, S&P 500, and I've been doing it for more than 25 years and started with just $50 a month on a salary of $20,000 a year. I've increased my contributions with promotions, second jobs, etc., and my portfolio has grown to just over $800,000. It is literally one of the easiest ways to become financially independent for anyone, including African Americans. Compound interest is the most powerful financial tool in existence. Keep debt low, preferably at zero, and automatically invest every month in the S&P 500 index fund. It's like having a savings account on super powerful steroids. Do the same with your 401k. I'm living proof that becoming financially independent after starting on a low income is attainable. It has to be a priority. And this is probably one of the most key points. Rich and regular, right? I love what they chose for essentially their brand name, their path. This is regular people that are achieving remarkable results just by looking and being willing to look at the problem a little bit differently. This is not the celebrity path to FI, the entertainer path to FI, the athlete path to FI, right? And they reference multiple times this perception that these are the narrow lanes that you can follow to break through. How much more powerful is it when you realize that this can be achieved, this remarkable result can be achieved by regular people that are willing, again, to look at the problem a little bit differently? And can you imagine the impact that Jillian and Kirsten are going to have on their audience over the next decade or so? I mean, this is a message that is going to reach millions of people.
Yeah, and this was one quote directly from them, and why you brought that up about entertainers and athletes is they're, quote, introducing this new picture of Black wealth. And they're providing the Black middle class with a playbook. And to their point, what you see and why you brought this up about the Obamas and Oprah and entertainers and athletes, that's all you see according to them. And it doesn't have to be this way. They're introducing this new picture of Black wealth. And I love that. That, to your point, Jonathan, it is replicable. It is this simple path to wealth once you get an understanding of it and once you believe that it's possible for you and your family and your friends. And seeing Julie and Kirsten do this is providing this light for other people to follow, and that it is possible. It doesn't just have to be this 1 in a million lightning in a bottle NBA player. That's preposterous. That's not replicable. But this new picture of Black wealth is, and I love that.
We got some feedback on this episode from Twitter, and Angela from Tread Lightly Retire Early, who we actually just featured in episode 121, said, I might be selfishly biased about my favorite Choose FI episode until today. Rich and regular take that top spot. Loving this discussion on wealth inequality and generational wealth. Well done, Brad and Jonathan, for stepping aside and letting them run. And you were right about that. This was really just get out of their way because there is so much value that they're bringing for the community here. At Fi Confession says, it's my new favorite episode. I felt like they were speaking to me in so many ways. And one thing I actually wanted to spend a couple minutes on, and Julian was actually talking about this, but basically talking about as you go up the corporate ladder, again, you start to see less and less people that look like you as you go up the corporate ladder. And there's something here. There's something that was incredibly valuable for him to realize that and then think about, all right, well, what is under my control? For him, it was entrepreneurship. It was building passive income streams, however you define that. But it was building alternate routes. And so with this feedback that we just heard a second ago, the most passive type of income that you can create is just to invest over long periods of time. And if you follow kind of the advice that we advocate on this show, invest in a low-cost, broad-based index fund as much as possible for as long as possible. That is a very simple form of passive income. Real estate, most other businesses are relative to that, are rarely passive, at least in the beginning, but there's something that you can build towards. But regardless of kind of how you define passive income, the larger structure of how do you build an escape route for a corporate hierarchy that doesn't facilitate your growth in the long term? I think many people, as they start to look at their corporate career, can see where they're going to max out at, where they're just not going to be able to break through and go farther. And to think about that and realize that you don't have to look, I mean, that can be something that you fight, at the macro level, but at a personal level where maybe you don't have as much control over whether or not someone else gives you that shot, to always have a plan A, to have an escape route where you don't need them or they need you more than you need them, is incredibly valuable. And so knowing what your options are and maintaining a really high savings rate effectively allows you over a period of time, especially if you can get to that 50% savings rate, it allows you over a period of like 10 to 15 years to basically say, my plan A is just basically after 10 to 15 years, I don't need you guys. You don't want to promote me to VP. You don't want to promote me to general manager, or you want to promote me, but I got to move my family to some desert island somewhere. And that's the only option you're giving me. That's not acceptable. That doesn't work for me. My plan A looks a lot more attractive. I'm going to get to the point where I don't need you. And I'm going to do that through the power of ferocious savings, right? And that gives me the leverage to make a choice that's in my best interest. What's crazy about that is that and I've seen it over and over again. I've seen it in other people's lives as well. As you get to the point where you don't need them, right? Or they need you more than you need them. It's weird how more and more opportunities start to come after you, how more creative working operations come after you. It's Brad, it's kind of like the Office Space mantra.
Yeah, it really is. It's kind of amazing. You're right. I mean, how many of these examples we've seen, it's almost like that FU money thing, right? When the power dynamic has shifted, well, all of a sudden upper management, they really desperately want you and they'll bend over backwards to keep you. But I think more importantly for this episode, Julian was saying something that like, it just never even crossed my mind. He said he was on a shorter timeline than anybody else. And he couldn't assume that opportunities would open for him, right? He said, and loosely paraphrase here, he never felt secure in his job since he didn't see other African-Americans in positions above him in his company. And when I asked them, is this getting any better? I was at least hopeful that they'd say like, yes, we're seeing people at lower levels finally starting to go up, and they just said no, which is to me is so saddening. And like there are these systemic issues, but they said, quote, we then focus on personal finance, which you can control with your own unique spending choices. And Jonathan, that's exactly what you're talking about. When it's within your control, okay, the system is rigged against me for whatever reason, and I can't help it. But you know what I can help? I can help what my savings rate is. And it's a simple path, right? You look at shockingly simple math behind early retirement on Mr. Money Mustache's site, and you see right in front of you the math of if I save 50%, it'll take me X years to get to retirement. If I save 70%, it'll take me 7 years or something like that. It's math. It's right in front of you. The power is in your hands. That is crucial.
And then Brad, my final takeaway on this episode, and something that you actually, paused on when we were recording it as well, and I'd love to get your comments, was really talking about essentially what Jillian did, which was building a framework for being a valuist, right? Actually identifying the enjoyment or the satisfaction, whatever term you want to attach to this, really building a framework for being a valuist. How do you determine how much satisfaction, how much joy, how much happiness do you get from any particular purchase or experience?
Yeah, I frankly do not know how he had the presence of mind to actually apply this in his life in real time. I've thought long and deeply about this concept of being a valuist. How much satisfaction and value do I get from a purchase or an experience? And he said, did that experience make you happy? Even just something about his tiny getting Chinese food in. And then he said, if we did this 3 times per week, how happy would you be? Would you get 3 times the happiness, or would there be diminishing returns? While that is just one tiny little example, it sets the mind thinking about, what do I expect to get out of this? What type of satisfaction am I looking to derive from this purchase or this experience? And also knowing that too much of a good thing really is not beneficial, or not nearly as beneficial as you think. There are diminishing returns. And I've never seen a better example of applying a valuist mindset in real life. And he said, it's applying business principles to my personal life. And he said something about the corner room in the hotel that costs so much more because it has a better view, or who knows, like it's on a higher floor or some such. Would that really provide that much more value to your life? Would your life be better if you're spending the extra money on that, or would it not be? We were just on vacation down in Florida, and we were in the room for maybe 30 waking minutes. We woke up in the morning, we got into our bathing suits, went down to the pool, stayed there all day, came back and went to sleep. And if we bought some fancy room, would that have added value to our lives? Or when you go to an all-inclusive, well, it sounds great to have a butler and a plunge pool and all this stuff, but you're not really in the room all that much, So this is just, again, a silly anecdote, but look at what you're truly getting from something, and does it provide you value? If so, buy it. I'm not a miser. I'm not someone who doesn't want you spending. I spend money on things I value, but I really critically inspect what value I'm going to get from that purchase or experience. And I think what Julian did with him and Kirsten was the best example I've ever seen of it, frankly.
I'm just glad we could bring up butlers on the path to FI. That was something I've really felt the need to clarify for a while now.
Oh man. But you've seen those, right? It's like $3,000 a night for like a butler and a plunge pool. Is that really better than the $400 a night all-inclusive room? I don't know. I mean, it sounds good, but
I don't want to come off as judgmental, Brad. So,
but yeah, but you know, I know you're poking fun of me here, obviously. If someone values that, then buy it. Again, it's not about being a miser. It's just about inspecting what you place value on.
So let's go ahead and pivot and bring in some questions and feedback from the community. And Zach, let's go ahead and bring you into this conversation. What do you got for us, man?
Hey guys, all right. So Peter says, what help can you offer a non-millennial? Actually, I'll be turning 60 this year. No savings, no 401k, living the nightmare paycheck to paycheck. I'll get $1,000 a month in pension from a previous job when I turned 65. Are any of your podcasts geared for starting at $0 with 10 years till I would like to stop working full time? Any help would be appreciated. Also going through a downsize or just getting rid of junk collected over the years. Not ready for the frugal woods to enter my place. Thanks.
All right. Yeah, well, maybe Liz could come in and help with that. Cool. Well, maybe we can make this episode about how to do that. One thing that he said that I really appreciate, and this was the larger point, is I don't think about things in terms of like current age. Certainly there are factors that come into place there. But Brad, what's really nice about this, regardless if you find this at the age of 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 in his case, you got to think about it in terms of timeline. So from a standing start, right? So you've cleaned up all of your debt, you're moving forward, but you don't have a significant net worth yet. If you can hike that savings rate up, it's a function of the math. If you can get to a 50% savings rate, 10 to 15 years is going to do it.
Yeah. I mean, you have 10 years. That is certainly enough time to make a significant amount of improvement. So, I mean, we've seen this from many of our guests, right? Like Deanna from episode 106 and from addiction to FI. Jonathan, what did she have? Like negative 100K, and she's on the path to FI in about 10 years. And she wasn't starting at 22 either. I mean, she was, I think, in her 40s when she started this path. So I think my advice to Peter would be assess where you are today, be realistic, but you have to make changes, right? If you're, as you say, living this paycheck to paycheck nightmare, then you've got to make changes. It's great to say, okay, I've got 10 years and we can sit here and say, that's enough time, but you're the one who has to get up off the couch and decide to build some space in your life between your income and your expenses. It's not going to magically happen. So that's going to require some change and some introspection, probably more than anything, of what am I getting out of my life? What am I getting out of all these purchases that I'm making, that I'm living paycheck to paycheck? So that might require some difficult choices, like looking at your living situation, maybe getting a roommate, maybe moving, maybe downsizing, looking at your car situation. Do you have car payments? Where is all your money going monthly? How much are you spending going out to eat? I have no idea. I mean, obviously, Peter, you're writing this in, and it's great to get our advice, but you've got to look at your situation and say, what can I change? Because you have enough time. You do. It's that simple, but you have to make changes.
And Peter, we've actually reached out to Sean Mullaney, who we actually have not interviewed on a Monday episode yet, but we will be later this year. He's an incredible source of knowledge. He's an accountant in the FI community. He actually writes over at FITaxGuy.com. We're going to bring in some of his input for you because there might be some unique considerations that you should be considering on your path to FI. Just a couple things that come to mind. If you're already drawing, or if at the age of 65, you will be drawing $1,000 a month for your pension, that is certainly a good baseline. If you're also going to be eligible for Social Security, you'll probably want to calculate that. And then you'll look at your annual expenses and you subtract whatever your baseline is. That remaining balance is really what is what you need to actually run your FI number off of, just for kind of that minimum threshold. So I will give the floor back to Sean, but I certainly think that, going back to Brad's thought, it just begins with, where are you? What is your actual situation? Do you have no net worth? Do you have some equity in your house? What are your actual expenses? Just start to get a lay of the land, and from there, you can formulate your actual plan. All right, Zach, let's go ahead and pull up this voicemail and see what Sean has to say.
Hey, Brad and Jonathan. This is Sean from FI Tax Guy calling in to discuss Peter's question. Quick caveat before we get going. We don't have enough information here to give Peter financial advice, but we do have enough information to start analyzing his situation and to give him 4 great action steps to take to improve his situation today. Let's recall Peter's predicament right now. He's 60 years old. He's been working all his life. He has 0 assets built up, and he's worried that he's not going to be able to retire at age 70. I'm going to make a simplifying assumption here and say that Peter has no net assets and no liabilities today. And I also want to recall that Peter mentioned that he, at age 65, will receive a $1,000 a month pension. That's going to be important. So how would I go with my financial planner hat on? How would I go about analyzing his situation? Well, the first thing I would do is look at Social Security. So I made an assumption here that Peter today makes $50,000. Let's say he does that, and he's going to make that until he's age 70, and he's worked most of his life. If you go to the Social Security website and put in those numbers, you'll find that at age 70, Peter would get approximately $2,700 a month in Social Security income. At that point, he will also get the $1,000 a month pension. So we're up to $3,700 a month that Peter would get at age 70. Now, recall that, though, he'll get that pension starting at age 65. So what Peter can do at age 65 is he could take the pension money and start investing it. Today, his salary apparently covers his expenses. So if he were to do that, he would build up a little bit of a nest egg, and that would probably give him something on the order of about $300 a month that he could safely withdraw from that nest egg that he would have built up at age 70. So at this point now, we're at roughly $4,000, right? $2,700 from Social Security, $1,000 from the pension, and $300 from the nest egg that he will have built up. So now we're at about $4,000 of monthly income that Peter will have at age 70. Now Peter needs to think about, well, what will his expenses be at age 70? If they're under $4,000 a month, Peter has a decent chance to be able to retire at age 70. But there's more. First, any good financial planner will tell you you need an emergency fund. And Peter has the ability, probably, depending on his income, to save up to $7,000 a year in a Roth IRA. That would be a great place to start an emergency fund because it can do double duty. It can act as an emergency fund because Peter can take out his contributions at any time. And let's say Peter, for the next 10 years, puts in $7,000 a year, which he's able to at age 60. He will build up another nest egg that will now be tax-free, and he could probably take about $400 a month tax-free out of that at age 70. So now we're up to $4,400 worth of income every year at age 70. So is there a chance somebody like Peter could retire at age 70? I'm here to say that there is certainly a chance that he could. We would need to know more information. Here's what I would do if I was Peter today. I would take these 4 steps. 1, I would get a hold of my monthly expenses. I would analyze 3 to 6 months worth of credit card statements and bank statements and get a handle on what it is that I spend every month. That number is very important. Second, I would go to visit the Social Security website, put in his information, and figure out what he might get at age 70 from Social Security. Third, I would start an emergency fund. Don't delay, just start putting aside cash, and we could figure out if a Roth IRA is best for that or if another way to save and invest that is appropriate. But I would start an emergency fund today. And then fourth, think critically about your expenses. You've got 10 years till you want to retire. You've got time to reduce your expenses. Brad and Jonathan, I hope this helps. Peter, there's definitely reason for hope. All the best to you.
Wow. Sean, thank you so much for sharing that with our community. That's amazing, and can't wait to actually come back and have you on the show and have you share your story with the community as well. For Peter, again, the biggest takeaway here is don't think about life in terms of your absolute age right now when you found this. Think about it in terms of timeline. right? We can control what we do over the next decade. And so instead of continuing down a paycheck to paycheck lifestyle, do something that your 10-year future self will give you a standing applause for. Take action, get your savings rate together, and move yourself toward a better financial future. So Brad, one of the other ways, Brad, let me tell you what we try to do with our Friday roundups.
Regale me, Jonathan, regale me.
Well, to our audience, one of the things that we try to do is actually bring feedback on past episodes because I think it rounds out the discussion. So in episode 121R, we brought on Chris Hutchins, and he was talking to us about how to get any job. It's an incredibly compelling segment on that particular episode. If you haven't listened to it yet, it's definitely worth your time. But we got some, I guess you could say, criticism. It's not really criticism as much as it is feedback. And I think they made a fair point, but I also think there's a counterpoint. And so let me read the comment first and then Brad, have you respond. So we got some feedback on this episode, and this was from Alice, and she says, I like the idea of get any job, but this particular segment doesn't seem totally accurate. I would love for you to do the job section with people from different industries and maybe an older guest. I don't think that some of the things that work in the computer world, startup world would work to get any job in other fields. The guest also reversed his it's stupid to send your resume in halfway through by saying that you won't be in the company system unless you send the company's resume. And while I understand the point that Alice is making, I think, Brad, it kind of loses sight of the forest for the trees. Did I say that right? Is it reverse, the trees for the forest?
No, you had it right.
All right, cool. Locking it in.
Yeah. So to me, when I'm listening to this episode, and I just listen to these as a member of the audience, I actually thought the Chris Hutchins segment was maybe one of the best things and most important things we've ever produced. I don't say that lightly because, obviously we've had a lot of amazing guests. To me, I look for these points in my life where it's almost like you can't unsee what you've seen. Your life, even subtly, is different going forward. So like for me, when I read the Shockingly Simple Math article, my life was forever changed. When I read the stock series on JL Collins's website, again, my life was forever changed because I looked at investing differently. That was the same with me. And I think, Jonathan, with you too, with this episode with Chris Hutchins. And when we had this conversation with him at FinCon, could you imagine ever now applying for 200 jobs and think you're doing something good by just clicking send on your resume 200 times?
Imagine what we're going to say the next time a guest comes on our show and tells us that they sent out 200 resumes and didn't get a response.
Yeah.
Like imagine what that means for us in light of this conversation. And we've heard it several times, and it's not to be derogatory, but it's like, again, you can't unsee this. And if it works in the computer startup world where everybody is doing this, how much more does it work when an employer has never seen anything like this? And to Alice's point, how will they even have your name in the system if you haven't sent in an application? Valid point. I get that. But that's not the point. The point is that most jobs are filled not because of a listing on monsterjobs.com or whatever that site is. Most jobs are filled because you knew someone that you thought would be a good fit. Okay, that's great. Well, I don't know anybody. Yes, that's the point. How do you know somebody? He actually gave us the steps to get access to the people that would be in the hiring position. He mapped out for you. How do you go from cold, not knowing anybody, to be able to get any job? And yes, it works in startup where people have been primed for that. In fact, it may be the only way to get the startup job in some of these sectors. But if it works there, it's much more likely to work in the traditional world where a CEO of a small blue-collar company has never had somebody pitch him on why they believe in their company. Never had someone pitch them on the benefits they could add to the role. When we're doing in our little business of ChooseFI, over time, different roles and responsibilities have opened up. And inevitably, as you start expanding, you start thinking about what else do you need? You start writing out what are the roles and the responsibility. Imagine someone taking the time to see your business as is and what it could be, and then bringing to you a job that doesn't exist, but tells you what it is that your company needs or how you could help. Nobody's doing that on monster.com. Nobody's doing that in the current environment. For that outlier, that individual that's stepping up and thinking that way, they will not have to send 200 resumes. It is I guarantee, I would bet any amount of money that individual that's going to the traditional roles that are out there where everybody else is just sending the resume and seeing what comes back, they're following the method that Chris Hutchins lays out. They will be able to get any job they want.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. And I'm thinking back to when I helped hire people at our accounting department. If we had someone come in who just wowed us and created a website or even just had insightful questions, if they did research on what the company was all about and how they could improve some aspect of the way that we file tax, or there's ways to save that they researched, even if it never came to fruition, it would just show that they cared, they were invested. So if I ever came to a point in my life where I needed to apply for a job again, hopefully that won't be the case, but if I ever did, I can guarantee you I wouldn't just click send on the resume. And I think the vast majority of people who listen to the show now at least have that in the back of their minds, somewhere deep in their consciousness, that, wow, I need to do it a little bit differently. And maybe I can get that dream job. Maybe I don't have to just settle. Maybe I don't have to just say, oh, I'm going to apply for 50 jobs and hopefully one of them get back to me. No, this is like the entire message of FI. It's putting the power in your hands. Chris spent dozens of hours researching that one company that he eventually got that job with, but that was his dream job and he went and took it. It wasn't just, oh, I wonder if I'll be the best out of these 20 or 50 or 100 candidates who are applying. No, I'm going to go and show those people that I can add more value than anyone. I've already put in this time. Can you imagine what I'll do when I actually work for you 40 hours a week? It is a game changer to me.
All right, guys, rounding up a couple other pieces of information. We announced an Ask Ed segment a couple weeks back. So Ed works with us here at ChooseFI, and he is, honestly, as much as we love Brad's skill and abilities with travel rewards, Ed takes it to the whole next level. And so he is creating content around travel rewards, and he's taking listener case studies and helping people plan out the travel rewards trip of their dreams, or at least their bucket list trips. Anyways, we collected listener case studies on the Facebook group over the last couple of weeks, and we are going to continue to do so. But we have some updates on how we're actually going to be releasing that information, right, Brad?
Yeah, I think the Ask Ed segment in the Facebook group is fantastic, and we will continue to do that. But it was just an overwhelming amount of responses, and Ed also noticed some patterns in there on particular questions and things that people really needed and wanted to dial in on. So what he's actually going to do is he's going to create, I think, at least one webinar and maybe a series of webinars where he kind of talks through a lot of these high-level concepts that many people asked about. So yes, definitely stay tuned for more info about that in the Ask Ed weekly Facebook post. And Jonathan, you and I will certainly mention those webinars when they go live here on the Friday Roundup.
And then the other thing we wanted to talk about, actually, this was, we kind of mentioned it in passing on episode 122R, which was our dividend deep dive with Carson, aka Big Earn, and Brian Feraldi. That was a wonderful episode diving into the pros and the cons, the strengths of dividend investing, who it would be a good fit for, and who maybe should make sure they're aware of some of the cons as well. One thing that we mentioned, but you may not have caught it, is that we actually did have some video attached to that particular episode, and some of you stumbled into it on YouTube, and you can find it there. And what I wanted to actually set up for you guys is that we are going to be, not every week, but progressively more in the future, going to be adding some video content on our YouTube channel. So if you have already subscribed, you can find it at choosefi.tv, choosefi.tv. Definitely go check for that, and we'll announce on the show when it goes live. But there's a couple different types of content that we are going to be moving towards producing. One is sporadically doing our Mondays or Friday episodes as it fits with the guest as a video podcast as well. So you can get the extra medium over there. I know some people prefer to listen to audio podcasts on their phones, but prefer to go to YouTube for video podcasts. So we're hoping that'll be a possibility. And then the other thing that we're going to be setting up for this, probably this fall, is actually going to be doing live, Ask Me Anythings or live kind of group sessions to take in your questions and really turn it into a back and forth version of the show. So that is something that we're really excited about. We're kind of piloting the technology now to see if we're comfortable with it. It certainly requires some changes in our workflow, but it's something that we're working towards. So kind of big goals for the end of the third quarter of 2019, right, Brad?
Yeah, I love that. Changes in the workflow. And also, we didn't even know we were going to record that. I didn't even have like my contacts in. I was lucky. I was had taken a shower that morning, right? So
thanks for clarifying. I'm sure our audience appreciates it.
Definitely subscribe. We're going to be putting a lot more on the YouTube channel. And the easiest way to get there is just choosefi.tv.
All right, so let's go and take a couple minutes and talk about what's going on in the local groups here at Choose FI. A lot of stuff coming up this week. Delaware had their first meetup on Sunday. Snohomish County had a meetup with the Financial Freedom Tour. Man, Grant and Cody making it across the country, man. Pretty cool. Nebraska had a meeting on April 16th, and there was actually a presentation on travel rewards. Albany is having their inaugural meeting on April 20th. San Diego, I think we've mentioned this in the past. Alan Donegan is going to be joining them on April 20th. 5 ways to build a business without money. Definitely make sure you're there for that if you're in the area. Choose FI Finger Lakes having their first meetup on April 28th. Connecticut on April 27th is going to be doing a spring swap and play social event. Columbus, Ohio is having an expat discussion on the 20th. And then there's a couple new groups this week, both Brisbane and Queensland, Australia. So some really cool stuff going on both in the country and around the world. All right, and let's go ahead and take a second and do a shout out this week. And this is to Chad. Chad says, Brad, I'm a new Choose FI community member. I've implemented several changes recently thanks to an effort to optimize life choices based on the knowledge gained from this podcast and website. For this week, I switched my $233 a month Verizon phone plan to an MVNO cell phone operator who sells Verizon-backed service for a steep discount. Now, rather than paying $233, we're going to be paying a maximum of $104 a month and cheaper if we can keep our data utilization down. My savings will be at least $1,500 a year, and although I do not know yet how I'm going to repurpose those dollars, if I direct it to my home mortgage, that change alone would result in paying off my home 43 months sooner. Additionally, it could grow by a notable amount if invested, even when accounting for inflation and taxes. So, Brad, your one thing a week post that goes up every Friday inspires a lot of this action. And this was some really cool feedback from Chad.
Yeah, I am just astounded every single week by that. What's your one thing that you've done to make your life better post that we do every single Friday? And yeah, this is a cool one, Jonathan, just like the reframe, right? So Chad here has just this one change to go from a Verizon phone plan to this other one that basically has Verizon service, but he's going to save almost $1,550 a year. And just even if, like he said, he was not sure he's going to do this, but even if he directed it towards his mortgage, it would pay his mortgage off almost 4 years earlier. Jonathan, 4 years just for getting the exact same cell phone service. That's astounding to me, right? And that typifies what we're trying to do here at FI. It's just live this intentional life and just be a little more optimized than you were yesterday. This is the perfect example.
And we just recently reviewed a few of the MVNO cell phone plans that are out there. I am not at this particular moment going to define what MVNO cell phone stands for, but just in your mind, equate it with less expensive. But we reviewed several of them that are out there, and we have a link for that article in the show notes for today's episode if you're interested in taking a look at that. But it's such an easy way to save a significant amount of money without really any noticeable difference in lifestyle. So just think about the problem just a little bit differently, and it's amazing the gains that you can make in a relatively short period of time. All right, my friends. Well, unfortunately, that is going to bring this episode to a close. Now, as you know, we like to finish every episode by doing a drawing for a copy of a book that we have found useful. There's 3 books that we offer. The first is J.L. Collins' book, The Simple Path to Wealth. The second is Dominic Cortuccio's book, Design Your Future. And the third book by Vincent Puglisi, Freelance to Freedom. If you want to enter the drawing, all you need to do is just go to choosefi.com/iTunes, follow the instructions there, leave us a short written review, and then send us an email to feedback@choosefi.com, letting us know that you left a review and what screen name you left it under. We give away 1 book for every 5 written reviews that we get, and we announce the winner on the Friday Roundup. And Brad, how many winners do we have today?
All right, Jonathan, we have 1 winner today, and the winner is Jennifer. She said, I've recently stumbled upon the FI movement, and this podcast has been pivotal to my broader understanding and specific strategy development for my own path to FI. I've been a lifelong learner in the area of personal finance and a longtime listener to other personal finance podcasts, but I eventually found that information stale. It rarely provided new, thought-provoking viewpoints that challenged me in my own financial planning. No longer. Each week, the Choose FI podcast gives me fresh material and new challenging ideas that I can consider, research further, and even apply to my own FI path. What a refreshing change. I'm now a loyal listener and look forward to learning multiple things each week. Thanks to Jonathan and Brad. Great job, guys. Keep up the good work.
All right, guys, it's been 2 years coming. We've been talking about this documentary forever, but that is what I want to leave you with. The fire is spreading and it's coming to a theater near you. Get ready to refer a friend. This is going to be a blast. June 2019. Everything that we've been talking about and building towards, it's coming your way. I'm excited. You're excited. The fire is spreading. We'll see you next time as we continue to go down the road less traveled.
You've been listening to Choose FI Radio Podcast, where we help middle-class America build wealth, one life hack at a time.